The screaming stopped after the third blow of the hammer. By the fifth, there was only the wet sound of bone breaking and the cruel laughter of men who'd never face consequences for what they'd done. 17-year-old Sarah Blackwood would never play piano again, would never hold a pencil without pain, would never touch anything without remembering the moment her hand was destroyed because she dared to laugh at the wrong man's joke. The town of Redemption Creek watched it happen. 73 people stood in that saloon on August 14, 1873. Not one intervened. Not one spoke up. They watched and then they went home and they pretended it had never happened. But Sarah remembered. Through 8 years of agony and adaptation, through learning to shoot with her left hand, through becoming someone the town wouldn't recognize, she remembered every face, every person who watched, every soul who chose silence over courage. Now it was 1881, and Sarah Blackwood had returned to Redemption Creek. And she'd brought justice with her. Redemption Creek, Montana Territory, 1873. Sarah Blackwood had always been the girl with music in her fingers. At 17, she could play Mozart from memory, could make the old piano in the church sing like angels. Her mother had died bringing her into the world, and her father, the town's only doctor, had raised her with books and culture and the firm belief that education could overcome any frontier roughness. She was wrong about that. They both were. The trouble started on an August evening so hot that even the flies seemed too exhausted to move. Sarah had been walking past the Lucky Dollar Saloon when she'd heard the commotion inside. Raised voices, the kind of argument that usually ended with someone thrown through a window or worse. She should have kept walking. That's what girls did in Redemption Creek. You didn't look, didn't listen, didn't involve yourself in men's business. But Sarah had never been good at following unspoken rules. Through the saloon's swinging doors, she could see Marcus Dalton holding court. Marcus was everything wrong with the frontier compressed into one man. Wealthy from his father's silver mine, cruel because he'd never faced consequences, powerful because the town needed his money more than it needed its conscience. He was telling a joke, a crude one about a soiled dove and a preacher. The punchline was obvious from halfway through, and it wasn't funny. But every man in that saloon laughed on cue because Marcus Dalton expected laughter. Sarah didn't laugh. She did something worse. She snorted, a small, involuntary sound of derision at the joke's predictability. But in the moment of silence before the obligatory laughter, that snort carried. Marcus heard it. His head turned toward the door with the slow deliberation of a snake spotting prey. "Who's there?" His voice was silk over steel. Sarah should have run. But 17 is an age where pride outweighs survival instinct. She stepped into the doorway, chin up, meeting his gaze. "Just passing by, Mr. Dalton. Did you laugh at my joke?" His eyes were cold, calculating. "Or laugh at me?" "I didn't laugh at all," Sarah said honestly. "That's the problem, isn't it?" The saloon went silent. 73 people. She'd count them later, would memorize every face, held their breath. Women didn't speak to Marcus Dalton like that. People who valued their safety didn't speak to Marcus Dalton like that. He stood slowly, deliberately, 6'2" of entitled rage. "You think you're clever, doctor's daughter? Think your books make you better than us?" "I think your joke wasn't funny," Sarah said, her courage fueled by ignorance of what was coming. "I think you're used to people pretending otherwise." Someone gasped. Marcus smiled, and that smile was the most terrifying thing Sarah had ever seen. "Boys," he said softly, "I think Miss Blackwood needs a lesson in respect." They grabbed her before she could process what was happening. 4 of Marcus's men, hired thugs who worked the mine and did his dirty work. They dragged her to a table, forced her right hand flat against the scarred wood. "You play piano, don't you?" Marcus asked conversationally, picking up a hammer from behind the bar. "Delicate work. Requires such precision. Such fragility." Sarah's father burst through the door then, his medical bag still in hand from a house call. "Marcus, for God's sake. She's just a girl. She meant no harm. She meant disrespect," Marcus corrected. "And disrespect has a price. Hold her. I'll pay." Sarah's father was begging now, all dignity abandoned. "Whatever you want." Money, services, anything. I don't want money, doctor. Marcus positioned the hammer over Sarah's hand. I want everyone in this town to remember what happens when someone laughs at me. The first blow shattered her index finger. Sarah screamed. Her father lunged forward, was held back by more of Marcus's men. The second blow crushed her middle finger. The third destroyed her ring finger. By the fourth and fifth, Sarah's consciousness was fragmenting. Her world reduced to white-hot agony and the sound of bones breaking. Through the haze of pain, she saw them. All of them. The bartender who'd served her father drinks for years. The shopkeeper who'd always given her penny candy. The banker, the blacksmith, the teacher who'd praised her piano playing just last week. Mrs. Henderson from the church. Young Tommy whose broken arm her father had set. 73 faces, frozen in horror but immobile with fear. Not one moved to help. When it was over, Marcus dropped the hammer. Let that be a lesson, he said to the silent crowd. Nobody laughs at me. Sarah's father carried her home through streets that emptied before them. People pulled curtains closed, turned away, pretended they hadn't heard the screaming. By morning, the official story was that Sarah had been in an accident. A horse had trampled her hand. These things happened on the frontier. Only Sarah and the 73 knew the truth. And Redemption Creek moved on like nothing had happened at all. The hand never healed right. Dr. Blackwood tried everything. Splints and surgery and exercises that made Sarah weep with frustration. But bones crushed that thoroughly don't recover. Her right hand remained twisted, the fingers frozen in a half-curled position, useless for anything requiring dexterity. The piano gathered dust. Sarah's dreams of becoming a concert pianist died in that saloon along with her innocence. But something else died too. The gentle, naive girl who'd believed that civilization had reached Montana territory. Her father changed after that night. The man who'd raised her with optimism and culture became hollow, haunted. He still practiced medicine, still set bones and delivered babies, but something essential had broken in him. He'd failed to protect his daughter. He lived in a town that had watched her be maimed and done nothing. The shame ate him from the inside. He died 2 years later. Heart failure, the official report said. But Sarah knew it was shame and helplessness that killed him. At 19, Sarah was alone, crippled, and filled with a rage so pure it kept her warm through Montana winters. She sold her father's practice, sold the house, sold everything except 3 things. Her father's medical journals, his gun, and her memory of 73 faces. Then she disappeared. What Sarah did in those 6 years, no one in Redemption Creek knew. She went east first, to Chicago, where a sympathetic doctor taught her what her father's journals couldn't. She learned anatomy with the precision of someone planning to undo it. She learned where to cut to cause maximum pain with minimum blood loss. She learned which poisons were traceable and which weren't. She went south to Texas, where a former Confederate sharpshooter named Cole took pity on a crippled girl and taught her to shoot left-handed. It took 3 months before she could hit a target consistently. 6 months before she was good. A year before she was exceptional. By 18 months, she could draw and fire faster than Cole himself. "What are you training for?" Cole asked her one evening, watching her practice by lamplight. "Justice," Sarah said simply. "Looks more like revenge to me. What's the difference when the law won't act?" Cole had no answer for that. She went west to California, where she learned to track from a Paiute woman whose family had been massacred by settlers. She learned patience from watching predators. She learned that revenge served cold was revenge served effectively. She learned to fight dirty from saloon brawlers. She learned to think strategically from watching poker players. She learned to read people from observing con artists. She became a student of violence and deception, and her twisted hand was a constant reminder of why. Through it all, she kept a journal, not of her training but of names. 73 names, organized by culpability. Marcus Dalton at the top, of course. His 4 thugs who'd held her down. The bartender who'd provided the hammer. The sheriff who'd covered it up. But also the witnesses. The ones who'd watched and done nothing. Because silence in the face of evil, Sarah had concluded, was its own kind of evil. She didn't plan to kill all of them. That would be impractical, and Sarah had become nothing if not practical. But she planned to make them understand what they'd done, to make them face consequences they'd thought they'd escaped. She changed her appearance, let her dark hair grow long and wild, learned to move differently, to carry herself with the hardness of someone who'd survived what shouldn't be survivable. She wore men's clothes, easier to move in, easier to conceal weapons in. Her twisted right hand she wrapped in leather, both to protect it and to hide its distinctive damage. By 1881, at age 25, Sarah Blackwood had become someone Redemption Creek wouldn't recognize. She'd become the thing nightmares were made of, a victim who'd survived, learned, and was coming home. She returned to Montana in spring, but not to Redemption Creek. Not yet. She established herself in Silver Falls, 30 miles away, called herself Sarah Black, kept to herself, worked odd jobs, and she watched. She learned that Marcus Dalton had expanded his mining operation, was now one of the wealthiest men in the territory, that he'd married the daughter of a senator, had political aspirations, that he was beloved in Redemption Creek for his generosity. She learned that his four thugs still worked for him, still terrorized people who crossed him. She learned that most of the 73 still lived in Redemption Creek. Some had prospered, some had struggled, but all of them had moved on, had pushed that August night into the past where uncomfortable memories lived. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They were wrong. In August 1881, exactly 8 years after the night her hand was destroyed, Sarah rode into Redemption Creek. She tied her horse in front of the Lucky Dollar Saloon, rebuilt after a fire, but still standing in the same spot. And she pushed through the swinging doors to begin collecting her debts. The Lucky Dollar was different but the same. New wood, new paint, but the same stink of whiskey and tobacco and desperate men. The piano in the corner was new too, newer than the one Sarah had once played in the church. She wondered if anyone here remembered that she'd been able to play. Wondered if they remembered why she couldn't anymore. The bartender was new, young, maybe 22, with the eager expression of someone who hadn't learned yet that Redemption Creek was built on buried sins. Sarah sat at the bar, kept her head down, her hat low. "Whiskey," she said, pitching her voice lower, rougher than her natural tone. The bartender poured. "New in town. Passing through." Sarah left coins on the bar, more than the drink cost. "Heard this is where the important men gather." "You heard right." The bartender leaned in conspiratorially. "Marcus Dalton himself usually stops by around 9. Owns half the town, they say." "That so?" Sarah sipped the whiskey, let it burn. "Must be nice owning things." She'd timed it perfectly. At 9:15, Marcus Dalton walked through those swinging doors like he owned them, which he probably did. 8 years had thickened him around the middle, put silver in his hair, but he still carried himself with that same entitled swagger. Still wore cruelty in the set of his jaw. Behind him came two of his men, Jake Ferris and Tom Caulfield. She recognized them immediately. Jake had held her left arm. Tom had held her right, had pressed her hand flat against the table while Marcus swung the hammer. Sarah's left hand itched for her gun. But not yet. Not here, not like this. Revenge required precision, required justice, not just killing. She watched them in the mirror behind the bar. Watched Marcus hold court, telling jokes that still weren't funny while men laughed too hard. Watched Jake and Tom flank him like loyal dogs, ready to hurt anyone their master indicated. Nothing had changed. Except Sarah. She waited until midnight, until Marcus and his men left. Followed them at a distance through Redemption Creek's dark streets. They split up at the crossroads. Marcus heading to his big house on the hill, Jake toward the miners' quarters, Tom toward a shabby room behind the general store. Sarah followed Tom, the weakest link, the one who'd always been a follower, never a leader. She caught him in the alley behind his room, her knife at his throat before he knew she was there. "Make a sound and you die," she whispered. "Understand?" Tom nodded frantically, his eyes white with terror. 8 years ago," Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest, "you helped Marcus Dalton destroy a girl's hand. You held her down while he crushed every finger. Do you remember? Tom's breathing quickened. I don't. You remember. Sarah pressed the knife closer. I can see it in your eyes. You remember her screaming. You remember her father begging. You remember doing nothing to stop it. Please, Tom whimpered. I was just following orders. Marcus would have killed me if I... But you didn't get killed, Sarah interrupted. She did. The girl she was died that night. But something else was born. She pulled back her right hand, unwrapped the leather binding, let him see the twisted, ruined fingers in the moonlight. Do you know who I am now, Tom? His eyes widened with recognition and horror. No, you're dead. You left town. I left to learn how to kill men like you. Sarah's voice was cold. I left to become good enough to make this right. And now I'm back. And I'm going to give you a choice. Anything, Tom gasped. Anything. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, you're going to go to Sheriff Morrison. You're going to confess what you did 8 years ago. You're going to name Marcus Dalton. You're going to name Jake Ferris and the other 2 men who helped. You're going to tell the truth about what happened to Sarah Blackwood. Marcus will kill me. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But if you don't confess, I will definitely kill you. And I'll make it slow. I've learned a lot about anatomy, Tom. About how much pain the human body can endure before it shuts down. Want me to demonstrate? No! Tom's voice cracked. I'll do it. I'll confess. You'll do it tomorrow night, Sarah repeated. And if you run, if you warn Marcus, if you do anything except exactly what I told you, I will find you. I tracked Apache through a sandstorm in Arizona. You think I can't find one coward in Montana? She released him, stepped back into shadows. Tom collapsed against the wall, gasping. One more thing, Sarah said. There were 73 people in that saloon. I know every name. I know every face. And I'm going to visit each one. Tell them that if you want. Tell them Sarah Blackwood came home. Tell them that silence has a price, and the bill is due. Then she was gone, leaving Tom shaking in the alley, faced with a choice between certain and uncertain death. Sarah had given him mercy, more than he'd given her. She wondered if he'd be smart enough to take it. Tom Caulfield didn't confess. By morning, he'd run, taken a horse from Marcus Dalton's stable and fled east toward Wyoming. Sarah had expected this. Cowards rarely found courage, even when their lives depended on it. She found him 3 days later, camped in a ravine 30 miles from Redemption Creek. He'd tried to hide his trail but was too panicked for competence. Sarah watched him from the ridge above, seeing him jump at every sound, his hand never far from his gun. She could have killed him there. Simple. Easy. But that would make her a murderer, and Sarah was something more complicated than that. She was justice delayed. Instead, she fired a shot into the rock beside his head. Tom scrambled for his gun, but Sarah's next shot knocked it from his hand. The third shot came close enough to his leg that he froze, hands raised, terrified. I gave you a chance, Sarah called down. One chance to do the right thing. You ran instead. Please. Tom's voice echoed through the ravine. I can't go back. Marcus will kill me. Then die out here, Sarah said coldly. Alone, afraid, knowing that the last thing you did in life was run from the consequences of your actions. Or go back, confess, and at least die with the truth told. You're insane, Tom shouted. This won't bring back your hand. This won't change what happened. No, Sarah agreed, but it'll make sure everyone knows. It'll make sure your names are remembered not as good men of Redemption Creek, but as the cowards and criminals you are. That's all I want, Tom. The truth. The acknowledgement that what you did was wrong. The law won't do anything, Tom said desperately. 8 years later, Marcus owns the sheriff. Even if I confess, nothing will happen. Maybe, Sarah said, but 73 people kept silent. If even a few start talking, if the truth comes out, Marcus's respectability crumbles. And without that, he's just another thug with money. Power built on lies falls apart once people stop believing the lies. She fired another shot, close enough that Tom felt the heat. Go back, confess, or die out here, and I'll make sure everyone knows you died running from what you did. Your choice, Tom. But choose now. Tom chose life. He rode back to Redemption Creek, though it took him 2 more days to gather the courage. When he finally walked into Sheriff Morrison's office and started talking, the foundation of Redemption Creek's comfortable fiction began to crack. Sarah watched from across the street as Tom emerged from the sheriff's office, pale and shaking, watched as Sheriff Morrison, who'd covered up the incident 8 years ago, stood in his doorway with an expression of trapped panic. The sheriff had been number 11 on Sarah's list. Now he had a choice too, continue the cover-up or save his own skin. Within hours, the story spread through Redemption Creek like wildfire. Tom Caulfield had confessed to helping Marcus Dalton maim Dr. Blackwood's daughter. The incident everyone had agreed to forget was suddenly being discussed in shops and saloons and homes. Marcus Dalton moved quickly to contain the damage. He called Tom a liar, a drunk, someone bearing false witness. He used his money and influence to pressure people into silence. But the crack had appeared, and cracks have a way of spreading. Sarah didn't wait for the law to act. She never expected it would. Instead, she visited the others. Jake Ferris was next. She caught him at his boarding house, confronted him in his room with the same offer. Confess or face consequences. Jake, seeing what had happened to Tom, chose confession. He went to the sheriff that same night, corroborating Tom's story, adding details that made the incident even more damning. The other 2 men who'd held Sarah down, Billy McRae and Samuel Yost, Sarah found together at Marcus's mining operation. She didn't offer them the choice. They'd been the most brutal, had enjoyed her pain. For them, she simply arranged accidents. A mining tunnel collapse that trapped them for 3 days before rescue came. Non-fatal but terror-inducing. When they emerged, both were babbling about Sarah Blackwood's ghost haunting the mines. Marcus fired them immediately, calling them hysterical. But more cracks appeared. Mrs. Henderson from the church came to Sheriff Morrison voluntarily. She'd been in the saloon that night, had watched the maiming, had kept silent. Now, with the truth emerging, her conscience overwhelmed her fear. She gave her testimony, named others who'd been there. One by one, the 73 faced a choice: come forward with the truth or wait for Sarah to visit them. Most chose to speak, not from courage, but from fear of what the crippled girl had become. Within 2 weeks, 47 people had given statements about what happened in the Lucky Dollar Saloon 8 years ago. The story was too big to suppress now. Newspapers in Helena and Butte picked it up. Montana miner accused of maiming doctor's daughter read the headlines. Town covered up brutal attack. Marcus Dalton's political aspirations crumbled. His wealthy in-laws, horrified by the scandal, severed ties. His business partners began distancing themselves. His carefully constructed respectability dissolved in the acid truth of what he'd done. But he was still powerful, still dangerous, and now he knew exactly who was orchestrating his downfall. Sarah had counted on this. She was ready. Marcus came for her on a moonless night, 3 weeks after Tom's confession. Sarah was staying in a cabin at the edge of town, deliberately isolated, deliberately vulnerable. She wanted this confrontation, needed it. She heard them coming, Marcus and 6 hired guns, men imported from out of territory who didn't know the history, who just saw a job. They surrounded the cabin, thinking they had the advantage of surprise. Sarah smiled in the darkness. She'd chosen this cabin specifically because it had 3 exits and clear sight lines in all directions. She'd prepared for this moment with the same meticulous care she'd applied to everything else. Sarah Blackwood. Marcus's voice carried through the night. I know you're in there. Come out, and we'll settle this like civilized people. Sarah moved to the window, staying in shadow. Like you settled it with 17-year-old me? With a hammer. You brought this on yourself, Marcus called back. You disrespected me. Actions have consequences. They do, Sarah agreed. That's what I've been teaching you. You've destroyed my reputation, turned this town against me, cost me everything I built. Marcus's voice shook with rage. For what? A hand? You sacrificed my entire life over a crippled hand. No, Sarah said quietly. I sacrificed your reputation over the truth. Your life, you destroyed yourself when you decided cruelty was entertaining. Come out and face me. I am facing you. You're just too stupid to realize how. The shot came from behind Marcus, one of his own hired guns dropping as Sarah's ally fired from the treeline. Sarah had spent 2 weeks recruiting, finding men Marcus had wronged, men who'd worked his mines and been cheated, men who'd watched him terrorize Redemption Creek and wished someone would stop him. 5 of Marcus's 6 men went down in the first volley, not killed but wounded, disarmed. Sarah had been explicit in her instructions. No killing unless absolutely necessary. This was justice, not massacre. The 6th man ran. Marcus stood alone in the open, his gun drawn but useless against enemies he couldn't see. Sarah emerged from the cabin, her left hand holding her revolver steady, pointed at Marcus's chest. In the starlight, her ruined right hand was visible, a permanent reminder of what he'd done. You should have left town, Marcus said, his voice tight. You should have stayed gone. I did leave, Sarah said, walking toward him slowly. I left and learned how to ensure men like you face consequences. I left and became good enough to come back. You want to kill me? Marcus gestured at the gun. Go ahead. Prove you're no better than I am. I'm not going to kill you, Sarah said. That would be mercy. Instead, you're going to prison. Sheriff Morrison finally found his courage, or his survival instinct. He signed a warrant for your arrest. Along with 47 witness statements, it's enough for territorial justice to act. I'll buy my way out, Marcus said with desperate confidence. I always do. With what money? Sarah smiled coldly. Your mines have been shut down pending investigation into worker safety violations. Your accounts have been frozen pending investigation into fraud. Your political connections have evaporated. Your wife left you. You have nothing, Marcus. I made sure of it. You can't do this. Marcus's composure finally cracked. I'm Marcus Dalton. I built this town. You terrorized this town, Sarah corrected. And they let you because they were afraid. But fear dies when someone stands up. When the truth comes out. When victims stop staying silent. She gestured with her ruined hand. You broke this 8 years ago. You thought that made you powerful. Instead, it made me determined. Every day this hand hurt, I remembered why. Every time I couldn't hold something, couldn't write, couldn't do simple tasks, I remembered your face. And I used that memory to become better at everything else. Sheriff Morrison emerged from the darkness with deputies, finally willing to act now that Sarah had done the dangerous work. Marcus Dalton, Morrison said formally, you're under arrest for assault with intent to maim, conspiracy, and intimidation of witnesses. As they cuffed Marcus, he stared at Sarah with impotent rage. This isn't over. Yes, Sarah said quietly. It is. You're going to prison. You're going to lose everything. And every day you're there, you'll remember that it happened because you hurt someone you thought didn't matter. Because you believed power meant you could act without consequences. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? That hammer you used? The bartender kept it. Gave it to me last week. Said he'd felt guilty every day for 8 years. I melted it down and made it into a donation for the church. They're using the metal for New Bell. Every time it rings, this town will be reminded, indirectly, of what you did. Your cruelty transformed into something that calls people to be better. Sarah walked away from Marcus Dalton for the last time, her twisted hand a permanent scar, but her soul finally at peace. The trial of Marcus Dalton lasted 3 days and destroyed what remained of Redemption Creek's comfortable amnesia. Sarah attended every moment, sitting in the front row where Marcus could see her ruined hand, where every witness who'd kept silent for 8 years had to face her. The prosecution paraded 47 witnesses who'd been in the Lucky Dollar that night. One by one, they testified to what they'd seen. The hammer, the screaming, the deliberate, methodical destruction of a 17-year-old girl's hand. The way Marcus had smiled while doing it. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue self-defense, claimed Sarah had been hysterical, had attacked Marcus first. But too many witnesses contradicted that story. The truth, once unleashed, was impossible to suppress. The jury took 2 hours to convict. Marcus Dalton was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison for assault with intent to maim. It wasn't enough, nothing would be enough, but it was acknowledgement. It was consequence. It was proof that even powerful men could be held accountable if enough people finally found their courage. But Sarah wasn't finished. The trial had addressed the perpetrator. The aftermath addressed the witnesses. She published a list in the Redemption Creek Gazette, all 73 names of people who'd been in that saloon, who'd watched, who'd done nothing. She didn't editorialize, didn't accuse, just listed names under the headline, "They were there." The reaction split the town. Some of the named felt shame and sought Sarah out to apologize. Mrs. Henderson broke down crying, explaining that she'd been terrified of Marcus, had felt powerless. Sarah accepted these apologies but didn't absolve them. "Fear is understandable," she told Mrs. Henderson. "But 73 people afraid together could have stopped one man. Your fear made you complicit. Apologies don't erase that, but they're a start." Others on the list reacted with anger, claimed Sarah was on a witch hunt, was destroying innocent lives. These were the ones who still didn't understand, who saw themselves as victims of her vengeance rather than participants in her maiming. To these, Sarah had nothing to say. She'd learned that some people would never accept responsibility, would always find ways to justify their inaction. For them, the public listing was consequence enough. Their neighbors knew now what kind of people they were when courage was required. The town itself transformed. Redemption Creek had been built on a foundation of willful ignorance, of looking away from uncomfortable truths. Sarah's return had demolished that foundation. Now people had to decide what to build in its place. Some families left, unable to live with the shame. Others stayed and worked to change the town's culture. A women's committee formed to address violence and intimidation. The new sheriff, Morrison, had resigned in disgrace, implemented actual law enforcement rather than serving the wealthiest residents. Sarah became a strange figure in Redemption Creek's reconstruction. Some saw her as a hero, others as a vengeful spirit who destroyed the town's peace. She didn't care about either interpretation. She'd come back for justice, not approval. 3 months after the trial, Sarah prepared to leave Redemption Creek for the second and final time. She'd sold her father's old property, donated the money to establish a fund for victims of violence who couldn't afford justice. The morning she was set to depart, a delegation came to her hotel. 20 people, some from her list of 73, others from around town. They stood in the lobby, uncomfortable but determined. Tommy Chun, now 26, stepped forward. He'd been 15 the night of the maiming, had watched from the saloon corner where he'd been sweeping. "Miss Blackwood," he said formally, "we came to say, we understand why you did what you did, and we're sorry it was necessary." "Are you sorry you watched?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Or sorry you got caught watching?" "Both," Tommy admitted, "but more the first. I've thought about that night every day for 8 years. Wondered what kind of man I'd become because I did nothing. Your return forced me to answer that question. Forced all of us to answer it." Sarah studied the delegation. These weren't the powerful who'd enabled Marcus. These were the frightened, the young, the powerless who'd been in the saloon and frozen. Could she blame them for their fear? Should she? "I didn't come back for apologies," she said finally. "I came back for truth. For acknowledgement that what happened was wrong and shouldn't be forgotten. You're giving me that now. It's 8 years late, but it's something." She picked up her bag, packed light as she'd learned to travel. "What you do with that acknowledgement is up to you. You can let guilt paralyze you, or you can use it to be better, to stand up next time, to be the kind of people who don't need someone like me to force you into courage." She walked past them toward the door, then paused. "Redemption Creek," she said. "Interesting name for a town that forgot what redemption requires. Maybe you'll figure it out now." Sarah Blackwood walked out of Redemption Creek into morning sunlight, her twisted hand marking her permanently, but her soul finally, painfully free. 10 years later, Redemption Creek was different. Not perfect, nowhere ever is, but changed. They'd renamed the Lucky Dollar Saloon to the Blackwood Memorial. The old church piano Sarah had once played sat in the corner, maintained but never played, a reminder of beauty destroyed. Marcus Dalton died in prison, unmourned and unremembered except as a cautionary tale. The 73 names Sarah had published became part of town history, not celebrated but not forgotten. A permanent record of what happens when good people choose silence. Sarah herself became a legend. Some said she went to California and became a lawyer fighting for victims' rights. Others claimed she died in Arizona, finally at peace. No one knew for certain, but her lesson remained. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Truth has power even when it takes years to surface. And victims who survive have a choice. Stay broken or become something harder, something that ensures the breaking meant something. Redemption Creek paid in blood, not literal blood, but the blood of reputation, of comfortable lies, of willful ignorance. Some prices are fair. Some towns deserve to pay them,